What does the Final Night series hide off camera from the player? When it comes to Five Nights at Freddy's fan games, it's hard not to think of the Final Night series by JeliLiam. Today, I want to revisit these 4 games and show you things behind the scenes you aren't normally supposed to see. From how the jump scares work, to out-of-bounds areas, to how the games are put together. And as a bonus 5th game, we'll be covering Liam's later project as well, AftonBuilt. Released in 2015, Final Nights is a Five Nights at Freddy's fan game that featured an array of different animatronics and interesting gameplay mechanics. Of course, there's plenty of things hidden off camera for us to check out, so today we're diving into Final Nights to take a look at everything we're not normally supposed to see. As always, I hope you enjoy. Let's do a quick summary of what Final Nights entails so everyone remembers the flow of events. So the game starts off with a player entering this pitch black house with a flashlight. And after entering, the door immediately slams behind us. The player then walks to the center of the room, and the night itself begins. We're definitely not alone though, as the marionette is inside the house with us. So the way this game works is a puppet will begin entering the room through one of 4 different places, including both side doors, the TV, and the cabinet behind you. In order to prevent him from jump scaring you, you have to quickly turn in his direction and flash him with your light. After reaching 6 AM though, the puppet will begin descending from the ceiling above the player, and this brings the night to an end. So that's it for the first night. I'll explain the next night when we get to it, but for now, let's brighten things up and check out the living room area. Taking a look at this room with all the lights on is pretty crazy, because the game is usually so dark you can hardly see everything that's inside. For starters, if we look at this table up close, we can see this bottle labeled Fredbear. But right next to it is something a little bit more interesting. On the edge of this table, there's a cutout newspaper article that reads, "Fazbears to close by year's end." And if we take a closer look at this article, we can see that the lorem ipsum placeholder text covers most of the page. As you may know, this is a default text that is used by game devs, graphic designers, and web designers for formatting purposes. Eventually, this text is supposed to be replaced, but in this case, the player will likely never be close enough to read it, so there was no need. On the other side of the room, we can find a few VHS tapes lined up against the TV, and upon closer inspection, they are actual movies. We can see The Land Before Time 7, Back to the Future, and lastly, Jurassic Park. For some reason, each of these boxes is mirrored though, so everything on them is backwards. It's definitely a cool find, considering you'd only ever see the box in the very front during normal gameplay. So when we're facing the TV, we can see these paintings hanging up on the wall. But because of how dark it is in this room, you can't really get a good look at them. Taking a look up close though, we can see that the biggest of these paintings is of some trees with legs. It's both funny and creepy at the same time. These other paintings are of a guy standing in front of a mountainside and a real-life photo of Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. Now, if we go into that room where the puppet was hiding during the opening cutscene, we'll find that this room is actually a fully designed bedroom. To my knowledge, we never actually enter this room in the game, so I find it a bit odd that they chose to put stuff back here. There's a bed with some side tables and a Freddy Fazbear plush, and there's also a large window that faces the backyard out here. The yard is surprisingly big considering we never actually go outside, and there's actually a lot hidden out here for us to look at. So one of the methods that the puppet uses to attack the player is actually through the TV. It typically turns on with a staticky sound as the puppet's face appears on screen. However, if we fly beneath the map, we'll see that particular screen is just floating down here. This asset is stored down here so that when the puppet attacks through the TV, it can simply be teleported into the living room instead of having to load it in each time. When we turn it off though, this screen will be moved back down here until it's needed once more. If we take a look on the roof, we can also find a lamp just kind of sitting here upside down. These lamps are actually placed within the walls of the house to look like wall-mounted lights, when in reality, they are full-size floor lamps. I'm not entirely sure why this one is up here, or why it's upside down. That's not the only thing up here though, because just above this lamp is actually the puppet themselves. They're floating up here in an A pose, waiting until the night actually starts, where they will then be teleported to one of the 4 locations I had mentioned earlier. This isn't the only version of this animatronic that is stored out of bounds though, because in the backyard, just outside that bedroom window, we can find another copy of them just floating under the grass. Now I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is actually used for the ending scene where the puppet slowly drops on top of the player. Speaking of the puppet, I want to see exactly what is happening when they enter the room through these various doors. So as you can see, they slowly slide the door open and inch their way inside the living room. And the moment we flash them with our light, they slam the door and move out of sight again. However, if we move the camera beyond that door, we'll see the puppet is now clipping through the wall in the bedroom. When they come through the cupboard behind us, their head and shoulders are just floating through the wall. And I have to admit, I was not expecting to see their legs pointing upwards like this, and I laughed pretty hard when I saw it the first time. Just the puppet, doing puppet things. Nothing to see here. Similar to the previous door, when we flash them with our light, they will retract through the wall and freeze in place out here, waiting until they are called upon to appear at another door. As you can see, they just vanish into thin air, and if we move the camera to that door on the right, we can see that they are now trying to enter through that door. Something I found really interesting though, is that when they are attacking through the TV, all the other versions of the puppet are loaded in at the same time. The puppet is currently present on the TV screen, and if we take a look out of bounds, we can see that they're also loaded in at each of these locations, waiting for the player to turn the TV off or get jump scared. When the TV is turned off, all but one of them will unload, and the remaining puppet will then attack the player through one of these locations. Throughout the game, this small robot will also spawn in from time to time, although it's hard to see as it unloads shortly after loading in. Upon closer inspection, we can see it's actually a 3D model of Mettaton from Undertale. I wasn't expecting to find this here, but it's definitely a cool little Easter egg. The last thing I wanted to check out on this particular map was the scene where the puppet drops down from the ceiling. And from another perspective, it's actually just that. They will appear in their default pose on the ceiling, where they then slowly make their way downwards. They'll continue descending until they're mostly clipped through the floor, where they then stop and the night comes to a close. That's it for the first level. Next, we'll check out the attic map that comes directly after this. So in this level, you enter the pizzeria and make your way to a staircase in the back of the building. From here, you enter the attic, where you then open a door to find Springtrap waiting for you inside. Fredbear is also in the ceiling above, waiting for you to drop your guard. You have to keep your eye on Springtrap, as well as flash Fredbear with your light in order to keep him from entering the attic. You must open the generator room, where you'll find a crowbar that is used to enter this room with a clock. Upon powering the generators, you gain access to the employees-only room where Fredbear and 3 endos can be found, as well as a pendulum for a grandfather clock. After putting the pendulum back in this clock, the generators explode, setting the building on fire. Running downstairs, you attempt to escape, only to be blocked by Fredbear and the puppet. Fredbear chomps you Bite of 87 style, and the game comes to a close. So the first thing I want to do was fly out of bounds and see what I could find. The first thing I saw were these large, detached pillars just kind of floating in the void. They're actually pretty large, and I'm not entirely sure what they're used for. If we take a peek underneath of this map, we can actually find both of the interactable items we eventually pick up in this level. The crowbar is just floating upright beneath the floor, and directly beside it, we can see the pendulum for the grandfather clock. Even more interesting, we can see the bodies of 3 endos clipping through the floor of this map. If we take a look inside the map right above these, we'll actually find their heads poking through the floor, giving the player the impression that these animatronics are in fact bodiless. So right next to this attic door where we came from, we can actually find Springtrap clipping through this section of the attic. This is actually the jump scare model that is used when the player comes in contact with Springtrap. Instead of loading this asset in every time the player gets jump scared, it's kept outside the map so that it can be teleported whenever it is needed. Way up on top of this map, we can actually find Fredbear floating all alone just above the roof. He's basically stored here until the game calls him to enter the crawl space in the ceiling. Speaking of which, if we move the camera into said crawl space and trigger Fredbear to spawn, we can see him just sort of appear in this attic area. He slowly moves towards the hole in the ceiling, and when the flashlight hits him, he retracts back to the starting position where he will remain, until he makes another attempt at entering this level through that hole. As the building catches fire and we make our way to the exit, we are of course stopped by Fredbear and the puppet. We can watch as the marionette slowly makes his way towards the player, and we are bitten by Fredbear. Finally, we can see in the credits sequence that this little forest area is actually an open map with intersecting roads and some trees. We can also clearly see the burnt remains of the animatronics in this ash and rubble. But with that brings us to the end of Final Nights. Final Nights 2 is the second installment of this chaotic series, and although the first game didn't have a whole lot for us to look at, this one definitely makes up for it. There are 6 total nights, tons of cutscenes, and multiple endings for us to check out. In this video, we'll be taking a look behind the scenes in search of things we're not typically supposed to see. Like, did you know that Reaper Spring Bonnie can be found within the True Endings map before the credits roll? There's so much more than that too, so I hope you enjoy this dive into Final Nights 2. So let's do a quick recap of everything that takes place in the game so everyone remembers it. So this game functions similarly to the other FNAF games. All 6 nights take place within this office area, where you have 6 cameras in front of you showing the various rooms within this house. You also have 2 cameras on your right that overlook these vents. You must use the cameras to keep an eye on the burnt animatronics as they attempt to reach your office. Freddy and Bonnie will try to attack you through the vents, so you must close the correct door to avoid getting jump scared. Foxy and Chica, however, will use the hallway behind you instead. So you either need to flash them with your light or close a door on them depending on which animatronic is present. In the cupboard behind the player, we must also periodically check the brother and flash him with our light whenever he moves. On night 5, these adversaries will be replaced with the Shadow Animatronics and Glitched Balloon Boy, who will enter our office using similar methods. Throughout the game, there's also a handful of cutscenes, many of which require the player to make a decision of some kind. And, based on your choices, you will ultimately reach different endings. Now that the recap is done, let's take a look at that title screen. With the lights on, we can clearly see each of these animatronics. Freddy, Foxy, Chica, and Bonnie are all lined up in a row next to the logo, and as we fly around this mansion in the background, we'll see that it is a fully modeled building. You can't typically see inside this building because of how dark the game is, but flying inside, we'll find that it is completely empty. It is, however, fully textured, which I found pretty cool. Now, this isn't the only title screen we have to look at, because this screen actually changes upon reaching night 5. As you can see, the animatronics on screen have now changed. Shadow Fredbear, Shadow Spring Bonnie, and Glitch Balloon Boy have now taken the spots of the original cast. The map is mostly the same though, except now there's rain and lightning as well. Also, just beneath these animatronics are 2 floating eyeballs. I'm not sure why they're down here, but they are. But that's it for the title screen, so let's jump into the first night. So before the first night begins, there are actually 2 cutscenes that take place. In the first, we're watching from the perspective of a fireman as he searches through the burnt rubble of Fredbear and friends. He slowly makes his way towards another fireman in the distance and stumbles across burnt Freddy. As the camera turns away, Freddy turns to look at the camera and then shortly after jump scares you. Viewing this cutscene from a different perspective definitely makes this a lot less scary though. All of this actually takes place on this large grassy plain, with a small patch of rubble in the center where the cutscene plays out. Taking a look at the character whose perspective we view this from, we can see that they are an empty helmet floating just barely above the ground. The person we see in the distance, however, is an actual fully modeled fireman. Taking a closer look at said fireman, we'll actually find that his hand has been cut off and is floating in front of his waist. Now, I'm not sure why this texture/material is set to this, but we can also find the word shutdown written on his model in several places. Off to the side, we can also find the text that is shown before and after this cutscene. They're just floating side by side near the edge of the map. Before moving on to the next cutscene though, let's take a look at that burnt Freddy jump scare. So as we approach Freddy in the rubble, the moment we look away, we can see him quickly turn to face the player. And when the camera turns back to face him, he lunges at the camera as it falls to the ground. Next, I wanted to take a look at the suit selection area. So the small storage room is used several times throughout this game, but presently it is only a small room containing 2 animatronic suits. However, taking a look out of bounds, we'll find both another Spring Bonnie suit and a floating Fredbear head just beyond that back wall. When the game is unpaused, both of these out-of-bounds objects move side to side just outside this map. The reason for this is because both of these objects are actually tied directly to the player's camera during this cutscene. Upon selecting one of these suits, the 3D text inside the room is warped out of bounds, and the selected suit will then be teleported inside, on top of the player's camera. Also, depending on which option the player chooses, the corresponding model from within this room will be teleported underneath the map out of the player's view. But that's it for this cutscene, so let's take a look at the map where most of the game takes place. So the first thing I wanted to do was get a wide shot of this entire map. And what is pretty neat is that each of the rooms that we see on the cameras are actually physical rooms within this map. They are fully textured inside, with all the objects and furniture we typically see through the cameras. It's really cool seeing these rooms up close though, as we only ever see them on these small screens in our office. We'll also find the animatronics that are inside these rooms, and we can actually watch them as they move around on their set paths to reach the player. The cameras in our office usually display these animatronics in static poses, but moving the camera back here, we can watch them moving throughout the house with their intended animations. Speaking of animatronics, if we head back into our office and take a look inside the cupboard, we'll find the brother. He just kind of sits here, waiting for his turn to attack the player. Right beside him though, we'll also find this dog thing. I'm not exactly sure what this is, but it's present in practically every room within this house, and it's kind of unsettling actually. Also, on the right side of our office, we can see an alarm clock on top of this desk. And if we go just beyond that wall, we'll actually find each of the faces for this clock just stacked on top of each other. There are hours 1 through 6 out here, and each of these will be warped inside the office and overlaid on top of the alarm clock as the night progresses, which I thought was pretty cool. So as for other stuff out of bounds, we can find burnt Fredbear's head floating just outside of our office as well. He's just kind of hovering in this corner, and just beneath his head, we can find his detached body. What I find odd is that the map we're currently viewing is Night 1, and burnt Fredbear isn't actually used until Night 5, so I'm not sure exactly why he's out here. Perhaps there's a chance he can appear in the office, similar to Golden Freddy from the original Five Nights at Freddy's? That is only speculation though, as he did not appear during my playthrough of this map. The other thought being that the developers copy and pasted maps to have a template to go off of for each night, thus duplicating all the contained objects, as each night and opening are technically whole new maps. If we jump ahead to Night 4, all the original cast will be present somewhere on this map, including Bonnie, who is almost too tall to even fit in the house. Luckily, he has no head, so he just barely fits. We can also take a look at Chica up close, and man, she is creepy. She's missing both her hands and her left leg, and the overall burnt textures just make these animatronics look incredibly menacing. Next, I want to see what happens when an animatronic actually reaches the office. So we can see Foxy as he's standing in the hallway, and we're typically supposed to close the door in order to make him leave. If we just wait, however, we can watch him teleport closer and closer to the player. If the door is left open, Foxy will then teleport into the office beside our chair, and the jump scare animation plays out. It's really neat watching this jump scare from a different perspective. So before we head into Night 5, let's take a look at what the animatronics look like when they're crawling through the vents. At first I didn't realize it, but this strange looking set of intersecting geometry is actually the ventilation system. Similar to the rest of the house, the vents are not actually connected to the office physically, and we can watch as Bonnie slowly inches their way through the vent, and the second they reach the end, they're warped into the office where they then jump scare the player. So moving on to Night 5, things are a bit different from the previous nights. The main cast of animatronics are no longer present. Instead, we have to deal with Shadow Spring Bonnie, Shadow Fredbear, and Glitched Balloon Boy. This map has also changed a little bit. The window in our office is now broken, and moving out of bounds we can see 2 trees and some rain effects just outside that window. Also present are these rectangular objects with a static texture applied to them. On Night 5, Balloon Boy can enter your office through the vents and break your cameras, resulting in them showing only static. These objects are simply warped on top of those screens the moment this occurs. We can also take a look at these animatronics up close, and just like the others, their appearance is super unsettling. They're all burnt up, and although the lights are on now, their eyes and teeth normally glow in the dark. Moving the camera over to the living room, we'll find Balloon Boy and Fredbear. Unlike the other animatronics who walk through the house, these guys will just teleport between locations, making it a lot harder to predict where they will attack you from. Taking a look at Night 6, we'll find that the original cast has returned once again. But if we take a look out of bounds, we can find Spring Bonnie and Fredbear just outside. As the night progresses, these two will begin appearing in the map as well. But for now, they're stored out here until they are called upon. Also out of bounds, we can find Balloon Boy, who is placed outside the map on the right side of our office. Similar to the other burnt animatronics, Balloon Boy will remain here until he is eventually placed inside the map. Something else I found while exploring this map was this set of eyes. There are 2 eyeballs just floating several feet apart from each other, similar to the pair of eyes I found on the title screen. However, that's it for the gameplay side of things, so now I want to take a look at some of those cutscenes. All these cutscenes are from the perspective of the player, William Afton. And depending on which Springlock suit was chosen at the beginning of the game, the player will view different cutscenes and ultimately reach different endings. In the first cutscene, William exits the storage closet, where we initially choose our suit, and talks to this child who's in front of the stage. He basically tells us to go away, so we turn around and head back toward the storage closet. From another perspective, we can see we are simply a floating Freddy mask as we interact with the child. And honestly, this cutscene is hilarious to watch from this angle. Now, if we choose the Spring Bonnie suit, during this cutscene, William will actually convince the child to enter the storage closet. And from there, we have to decide his fate. Unfortunately, I couldn't view this cutscene from a different angle, but if you choose the option to kill him, he simply rotates to the side and the cutscene ends. When saying no to killing him, you open the door and then look the other way. What's interesting is that we can actually access this map before choosing a suit at the start. And in doing so, a player controller is loaded in on this map. So we can freely walk around this lobby as long as we want, because the scene never actually plays out. Next, we have another cutscene taking place inside the pizzeria. And in this one, we can see 3 kids in animatronic masks standing in front of the stage. They try to run away, and if you catch one of them, you must decide whether or not to kill him. If you say yes, then you'll ultimately reach the true ending. However, if you choose a Spring Bonnie suit at the start and kill the first kid, then letting this child go will actually result in the Bite of 83 bad ending. In this scene, William enters the lobby to find 4 kids in these animatronic masks, lifting the crying child up into Fredbear's mouth, before ultimately being bitten. It's actually pretty funny watching this from a different angle though, as we can see the crying child being lifted up and then just quickly flying into Fredbear's mouth. Also, if we take a peek underneath this map, we can find multiple sets of eyeballs just kind of floating down here. There's also a Spring Bonnie suit that appears to be laying on its side. Now, to my knowledge, there are 3 endings that the player can encounter during normal gameplay, and the other bad ending shows William waking up in his bed, insinuating everything that has happened was only a dream. If we fly out of bounds, we'll see that this cutscene actually takes place in the same map as the game itself. And just outside the hallway in her office, we can find Burnt Freddy and Foxy standing on the small piece of flooring that extends beyond the house's walls. I'm not sure why they're here, as they don't actually appear in this cutscene to my knowledge. However, in the true ending, there is a lot more going on. This ending shows William hiding from Shadow Freddy, as he interacts with the various animatronics inside of an old Freddy Fazbear's pizzeria. William attacks the various animatronics from behind and teleports throughout this location each time. Eventually, he ends up in this back room where the brother corners him. William puts on the Springlock suit and it immediately goes off, killing him inside. The puppet floats away and the credits roll. At the very end, we see a teaser for Final Nights 3, where we can see what I believe is Reaper Spring Bonnie, who appears in the next game. So going back in time to the beginning of this cutscene, we can see how it actually works. First of all, taking a look around this map, we can find a few interesting things hidden out of bounds. Up on the roof, there is a Shadow Spring Bonnie just standing in the rain, and directly next to him, we can see the Reaper animatronic from the end credits scene. It's just violently shaking around, and next to it, we can find the number 3 that is placed above them in the final shot. Now, going inside, I want to see what happens when we attack the animatronics from behind. As you may have guessed, the moment we attack these animatronics and the screen dips to black, we're actually being quickly moved across the map to another room. At the end of this cutscene, we are stuck in this back room, and in order to protect ourselves, we equip the Spring Bonnie suit. During this particular scene, however, we can find Shadow Freddy just outside this room in the corner. And for some reason, his head is on backwards, and he will remain here outside the map until the cutscene has finished. Directly beneath Shadow Freddy, the Springlock suit that was in the corner of this room is just kind of chilling beneath his map. The moment the player puts on the suit, the one in the corner is teleported down here out of view for the remainder of the scene. So I managed to come across each of these endings during my playthrough of the game. But within the game files, I was able to locate another ending that I'd never actually seen before. In this ending, we can see William being arrested by a police officer. This takes place in the same pizzeria area as before, right next to the stage where Fredbear and Spring Bonnie are performing. The policeman also tells William that the person who called for his arrest was his own son, Michael Afton. What's funny is that we're not wearing an animatronic suit during this cutscene, meaning we can't actually see William. So it appears as though this policeman is arresting an invisible criminal. Also, if you know how to actually trigger this ending in the game, let me know in the comments below. So let's talk about some hidden bonus content. So after digging through some of the game files, I found that there are a surprising amount of maps hidden within them. But before we take a look at these, I want to take a quick peek at the museum. So the museum is made available after completing the 5th night, and it contains all the animatronics we encounter in this game. We can take a look at all of them in here with the lights on, including this small robotic dog that is underneath this table. Down below, we can find bits and pieces of various animatronics present on this map. First, we can see a disconnected piece of Chica's model swaying back and forth as she runs in place. Over by the entrance, we can find the Spring Bonnie head that William had worn throughout the game, as well as Fredbear's body. His head is on display within the museum, but his body has been separated and moved just beneath the map. There's also this strange floating X. I'm not sure if this is used somewhere within the museum, as I didn't come across it during my playthrough of the game, but it's floating here just underneath the floor. Once again, there is this sideways Spring Bonnie just kind of hanging out down here, but that's everything I could find hidden within the museum. So now let's talk about that bonus content. Something else that I come across was this map simply called Starter Map. As some of you may know, This is a default map that contains a bunch of assets that can be used within your Unreal Engine projects. There are a handful of textures, models, and particle effects all lined up neatly in the center of the map. There's also a map called Showcase, which is basically just a jungle with tons of trees. Lots of asset packs for Unreal Engine and Unity typically ship with an example map showing all the assets in use, ready to be explored in Engine. And that's what this is. These aren't the only maps I found that are used for storing assets though, because there is also a map called Nature Effects Map. This map actually belongs to an asset pack called VFX Weather Pack, and it contains various weather effects including the rain and lightning we see throughout the game. Finally, there's this map with the burnt animatronics posed in front of the house from the title screen. There's rain and lightning, as well as some dense fog placed throughout the scene. Not to mention a glowing number 2 above these animatronics. This map is named Banner in the game files, and was likely used for promotional purposes for advertising the game, like for taking a screenshot for a banner, or getting a video clip. But with that brings us to the end of our look behind the scenes of Final Nights 2. Final Nights 3 is the third installment in this terrifying series of fan games. Based heavily on FNAF 4, as well as sister location, the environments and animatronics you are faced with in this game are nothing short of nightmare fuel. Today we'll be taking a look out of bounds at some things we're not typically supposed to see, including a hilariously distorted circus baby. There's a lot more than that too, so I hope you enjoy this look behind the scenes of Final Nights 3. As per usual, I'll do a quick recap of the game so we're all refreshed on what we'll be covering. So the game starts off showing the player arriving at a hospital in the back of an ambulance. From there, you're meant to survive 5 nights in the hospital as you are relentlessly attacked by the Reaper animatronics. You must close the curtains on the Reaper puppet as they approach your door, shut the door on Reaper Balloon Boy's closet when he tries to exit, and turn the thermostat on to prevent Mango from attacking us through the vents. That's not all though, as both Reaper Spring Bonnie and Golden Freddy will make their way down these hallways in an attempt to reach the player. Something else I need to mention is that time doesn't pass automatically in this game either. In order to progress, you must climb into your bed and sleep to reach 6 AM. On night 5, these animatronics are replaced with Shadow Bonnie, as well as Grim Toy Chica and Fredbear. You must wind the spring locks on each of the Grim animatronics, as well as fend off Shadow Bonnie in various locations. After each night is completed, you'll play through a cutscene that contains a ton of lore for this game, and you'll be made to play a game of hide and seek with Reaper Toy Chica. Now that the recap is done, let's take a look at the title screen. Title screens. This game actually has a bunch of unique title screens that change depending on how far we've progressed in the game. One of the first screens we'll see is this one showcasing Reaper Spring Bonnie in the hallway, and they look super creepy up close. If we fly behind the closet in our hospital room, we also find Reaper Balloon Boy just kind of frozen here with his arm extending outwards. Up on the roof though, we can find some pretty interesting things. Here, we will find Reaper Toy Chica and a woman in a Chica Springlot suit asserting dominance as they T-pose beside one another. Right behind them, we can also find the Reaper puppet in their default pose, which kind of looks like they're waving at us. In the back, we'll find the clock that is viewed when the player is sleeping, just floating above the roof. This clock is also present throughout each night. Zooming out on this map, we'll see that the area where all this takes place is a large city, and it's surprisingly massive. Moving on to the Balloon Boy title screen, most of this map is the same as before, except the other animatronics are no longer present, and the puppet is now floating just beyond this rooftop. Unlike the first title screen, however, the puppet is now in this looping animation rather than a static pose. Taking a look at Balloon Boy's closet, it's a lot easier to see him as he moves in and out of the screen. Going inside the closet, we can see him lunge forward as the door opens, and then retract partially into the wall as it closes. Also, in the hallway, we can find Reaper Spring Bonnie just chilling here. So the other screens that take place within the hospital aren't all that interesting. But there are a few menus that are shown off only after the player reaches one of the game's endings. After the Final Night's ending, the title screen shows Spring Bonnie squirming on an operating table in the center of the room. Moving out of bounds, we can see that this map is actually just a small room floating in an empty void. Similar to this, after the bad ending, the title screen shows only a surgical light, as the sounds of an operating room can be heard in the background. Moving the camera back, we can see that this room is mostly empty, aside from this operating table and a single door. Finally, there is the FNAF ending title screen that shows a severed circus baby head on the floor. Now, this screen looks pretty simple at first, but just underneath this room is something hilarious. If we move the camera down below, we'll find Circus Baby's neck stretching all the way down to her T-posing body, and right in front of her neck are her floating eyeballs. I'm not sure what I was expecting when I loaded up this screen, but it definitely wasn't this. That's it for the title screens, so let's move on to the game itself. So once we start the game, we're met with a quick tutorial, which actually has a lot to look at out of bounds. On top of the hospital, we'll find something quite interesting. Just above the clock that I mentioned before, we'll find a stack of 3D rectangles. One of these is blank, while the other 4 have a texture applied that contains the face of an animatronic. These animatronics include Foxy, Fredbear, Toy Bonnie, and Toy Freddy. So the very bottom rectangle is actually placed just above the clock to make it appear as though it's floating in an empty void. As for the others, I never actually encountered them during my playthrough of the game. However, looking through the game files, I found that these objects are labeled as hallucinations. So to my understanding, these objects would flash in front of the player's camera during regular gameplay, similar to how the player hallucinates with the animatronics in the original Five Nights at Freddy's game. If you know what these are used for, let me know in the comments. So moving on to night 1, if we take a look out on the balcony, we can see what the puppet looks like as they're approaching our room. They're just floating here, and each time they move closer, they simply warp into their next position. Back inside, if we don't stop Balloon Boy from leaving the closet, he will climb up on top of our bed where he will prevent us from sleeping. This little lad is slightly less creepy when he's not stalking us from the closet, but he's definitely still creepy. Also, way out in the distance on night 2, we can see that these buildings are on fire, and no matter which way you view them from, the flames are programmed to always face the player. Heading into night 3, it's the same as nights 1 and 2 for the most part, except now we also have to deal with Mangle, who will attack us from the vents. If we fly up onto the roof once more, we will find Mangle and Reaper Golden Freddy up there. It's interesting because, to my knowledge, this animatronic doesn't appear on this particular night. As you may know, game devs will often copy and paste these maps instead of rebuilding them from the ground up, and they could have simply forgotten to delete this guy. Also, taking a closer look at Mangle, they are pretty terrifying. Definitely not something I want lurking around in the vents. Speaking of Mangle, the vent within this map is actually just a small open area within the ceiling. And even though we can hear Mangle as they approach, they don't actually appear within this vent until it's opened. If the player doesn't turn the heat on in time, Mangle will come through this vent and eventually jump scare you. Watching them come out of the vent from another angle, we can see that they simply warp inside of it the moment this occurs. On night 4, Reaper Golden Freddy is thrown into the mix, and things start to get a bit hectic. Moving the camera out into the hallway, we can take a look at this animatronic up close. They operate similarly to Reaper Spring Bonnie as they slowly make their way toward the player. This animatronic stops at the window though, where we must flash them with our light to make them leave. If you don't catch them in time though, they will teleport into the bed while you're sleeping, where they will then jump scare you. Flying up onto the roof, we'll see that it's mostly the same, except now we can find Reaper Toy Chica up there as well. That's really it for night 4, so let's jump into night 5. So as I mentioned before, the animatronics are completely swapped out on night 5. Moving into the hallway, we can take a good look at the grim animatronics with the lights on. And, well, they're purple. Now what's interesting is that within these animatronics, we can actually see the ghostly models that are stored inside. Down below, just beneath this hospital area, we can find Shadow Bonnie waving at us as well. At least, that's sort of what it looks like. This is actually the model that is used when Shadow Bonnie is knocking on the glass door next to our bed. And when the game calls for Shadow Bonnie to appear, they'll be warped up onto that balcony. Speaking of Shadow Bonnie though, when they appear in that little closet, we can see how they just sort of poke their head through the floor. Their arms are also folded and clipping through their own torso. The reason for this is because when you get jump scared by Shadow Bonnie in this closet, their arms detach from their body and grab onto the player. This actually looks really funny from another perspective, as their hands just sort of float around. Right next to this Shadow Bonnie, we can also find Reaper Golden Freddy down here as well. But that's it for nights 1 through 5, so let's take a look at the minigames. So there's a few different endings in this game, and in order to reach the good ending, well, you have to do things just right. This includes winning each and every round of Chica's hide-and-seek minigame without failing. So this game is played after each night, and in it you have to flash Toy Chica with your light depending on which hallway she's coming from. This map is a fully modeled storage area. And if we fly down below during this minigame, we can see that until Chica has moved to one of the hallways, she is simply stored down here. Behind this storage area, we can also find text that says, "Great job, stored out of bounds." When the player completes this game, the camera quickly moves through the wall and zooms in on this text. So during the first few nights, there is this small Fredbear plush hidden within our room, and clicking on it takes us to this arcade area. these minigames simply prompt you to decide between two options, and the decisions made in these arcade minigames will ultimately affect which ending you get as well. If we fly just beyond this arcade cabinet though, we will find each of these screens we will encounter during this minigame floating outside of this arcade area. These screens change depending on which version of the minigame we're playing, and we can even find the characters that appear on screen floating out here as well. Now that we've covered the minigames, let's take a quick peek at this game's cutscenes. So the very first cutscene shows the player arriving in an ambulance and eventually being wheeled into the hospital, and I was really curious to see how this is pulled off. Inside the ambulance, we can take a look at the player's model from another perspective, and they seem pretty unfazed by all of this, which is surprising because this ambulance is actually flying hundreds of feet in the air. It will remain here for a few seconds before it's teleported down into the hospital's parking lot, where the player will then be wheeled inside. This hospital has a handful of rooms in it, and is furnished in the areas that the player will be able to see. If you move down the left hallway, however, you'll see that the building just sort of comes to an end. Now, I'm no architect, but I'm pretty sure this place won't be passing any inspections. Eventually the player is wheeled down the hallway with the game's logo, and this cutscene comes to an end. In the next cutscene, we're walking through the Afton family's house, where we overhear William and his wife, Martha, arguing over the shortcomings of their business, where Martha threatens to shut it down and leave with the kids if he doesn't figure things out. Moving the camera into that room, we can see them having the calmest argument of all time, as they just stare off into space. Taking a look out of bounds, we can actually find the main character, Kevin, and his brother Mike on top of the roof. There's also a small yard area outside the window, but not much else. If we fly over the city, that is typically visible through the window, we'll see that it's the same city map that's been used throughout this game. The next cutscene I want to check out is this one, where we're able to freely explore an under construction Chica's party world. Here, we can hear William arguing with a construction worker over safety concerns with Chica's spring-lock suit, and sequentially, their progress on the elevator's construction. Zooming out, we can see that this building actually sits on top of a small hilly plain of grass. There are a few trees surrounding it, but what interested me the most was the elevator shaft. After taking a closer look, however, we can see that it is in fact just an empty shaft in the ground. So the next cutscene takes place within Chica's party world after it has been opened to the public. We can overhear two friends bantering over how terrible the place is. And aside from exploring a little bit, that's typically all that happens during this cutscene. After this, the player is meant to finish Night 5, and upon doing so, they will reach the bad ending. In this ending, the player is laying on an operating table with a surgeon standing over them. They try their best to resuscitate you as you're flatlining, but unfortunately there's nothing they can do, and you're declared dead. Viewing this cutscene from another perspective, it's no surprise they weren't able to save us. The surgeon isn't even holding anything when they zap us. Aside from the surgeon and operating table though, this room is completely empty. But now let's take a look at these other endings. So there are two more endings for us to look at, and in order to access these, you must play each of the arcade minigames, and win every game of hide and seek against Chica without dying. If the player is successful, the doors to the elevator room will be opened during Night 4's cutscene. After the player enters the elevator, who is currently playing as William's daughter Karen, they're taken to the basement area. This area consists of a few rooms and a single hallway, but upon entering this room containing Circus Baby, she will extend her hand to us. If we approach her, she will grab us and pull us into her stomach hatch. And this is what that looks like from another perspective. After completing Night 5, there will be a cutscene that takes place in the scooping room, where the player is stuck inside a Circus Baby. If we do not move, Karen will be killed by the scooper, and we ultimately reach the FNAF ending. From another perspective, we can see that during this ending, Circus Baby just kind of flops down onto the ground violently. However, if we attempt to escape during this cutscene, Circus Baby will flop over to the ground before they can be scooped. Karen gets crushed by Circus Baby though, so they end up dying anyway. The camera is then warped to this other room within the same map, where a spring Bonnie suit is laid out on a table, and William alludes to putting Karen inside the suit. Afterwards, the player is then thrust into an escape sequence where they're meant to leave the hospital while being pursued by Karen's spirit, who has taken the form of Shadow Bonnie. You must also avoid Grim Fredbear and Toy Chica as they continue to pursue you until you reach the lobby. Here you come across a Fredbear plush who is possessed by your mother, who was previously killed by William. She convinces you to let the animatronics kill you as well so you can join them. And then after a jump scare by Shadow Bonnie, we then see that the player becomes the brother, ultimately leading to the final night's ending. I, however, decided to create my own ending by leaving the hospital and noping the heck out of there. But with that brings us to the end of Final Nights 3. Final Nights 4 is the fourth and currently final installment in this haunting series of fan games. Today we'll be exploring an array of grim locations, as well as meeting a vibrant cast of, well, not so vibrant animatronics. In this video, we'll be taking a look out of bounds in search of things we're not typically supposed to see, including one of the largest animatronics I have ever seen. There's a lot more than that as well, so I hope you enjoyed this look behind the scenes of Final Nights 4. As always, I'll do a quick recap, that way we're all refreshed on what we'll be covering. The game starts off showing a quick cutscene where a paranormal investigator named Max Donovan is given an anonymous tip on the disappearance of Henry Stillwater. Throughout the game, you'll swap between standard, FNAF-inspired gameplay and point-and-click investigations as you complete each night. When playing as Henry, you must survive 5 nights in this horrific Fredbear's restaurant, as an array of animatronics attempt to reach you, with each night bringing a new robotic adversary. You must lead Fredbear through the restaurant using an alarm in order to prevent him from shutting the power off, as well as keeping tabs on Spring Bonnie as they wander through this establishment. The Puppet Master will be activated on night 2, and you must watch him frequently to prevent him from reaching your office. On night 3, Proto Spring Bonnie will be awakened, and you must use the air refresh button whenever he stops moving, and failing to do so enough times will result in him jump scaring you. On night 4, Proto Spring Freddy will begin making his way to your office through the vents, and you must seal off the duct above your office at the right time to repel him. Lastly, on night 5, Insane Freddy and Bonnie will be the only present threat. You must locate them on the cameras and activate the alarm in whichever room they appear in to prevent them from jump scaring you. After completing the 5th night, you'll begin a point-and-click escape sequence where you will ultimately be stuffed into a Fredbear suit by the insane animatronics. Now, there is just too much to cover in a single summary, so we'll be going over the investigations a bit later in the video. But with the general recap out of the way, let's check out the title screens. So there are a handful of these screens to check out, as this menu changes with each chapter we complete. This first title screen swaps between the Spring animatronics and their prototype counterparts. In zooming out, we can see that the animatronics not currently visible on screen will be stored underneath the others, and after enough time has passed, they will instantly swap out again. There's a bunch of furniture and other Fredbear plushies floating around in the background, but that's it for this title screen, so let's move on to the next. In this screen, we will see the Reaper animatronics appearing in front of the camera. If we move the camera back, we can actually see that each of these animatronics is stored on the right side just off camera. When the swap occurs, a new animatronic will be placed in front of the camera, and the other will be moved back to their waiting position off screen. After achieving the good ending, the title screen will show the burnt rubble of Fredbears, I believe, and in the background, we can see a large city. Moving the camera back, we can see how the scene is actually set up. The city visible in the background is actually massive compared to the area we actually see. And between these two locations, we will find a large body of water. Compared to these background assets, this title screen is absolutely tiny. Finally, we'll take a look at the menu showcasing the insane animatronics. So the screen typically shows Freddy and Bonnie in front of a wall of static, and the menu in its entirety has this glitchy effect applied to it. If we turn these effects off though, well, it's not as scary. This is actually the same location that the first title screen took place in, except the animatronics have been replaced, and the effects applied to this scene make it look completely different. That's it for the title screens though, so let's jump into the gameplay portion and see what we can find hidden on nights 1 through 5. So the first thing I want to do is take a look at this office area from another perspective. We'll be spending all 5 nights within this office, and from another angle, it is definitely a bit claustrophobic in here. We have practically no room to move around, as right behind our chair is a brick wall. Flying around the rest of the office though, there is some pretty interesting stuff for us to look at. For starters, there's this huge stack of screens hovering just outside of the pizzeria. Almost all of these screens are currently blank, but at the very bottom we'll find the security camera overlay and a screen completely covered in static. When the player is actively using the security cameras, the room they are viewing will be activated within this stack and moved down inside the UI panel. There's also a screen off to the side that changes depending on which camera is currently active. When the player uses this surveillance system, their camera is quickly moved over to this location directly in front of this main panel. Now if we head back inside and fly over to the stage, we can see both Spring Bonnie and Fredbear standing side by side. Now when these animatronics leave this stage to walk around, the camera will be briefly covered by static. The reason for this is because these specific models that we see on stage are not the same ones that walk around this map. The moment either of these animatronics leaves the stage, these particular models are moved beneath the map, where they will remain for the rest of the night. If we look just above the ceiling, we can actually see the mobile versions of these animatronics are stored out of bounds until their stage counterparts are moved off screen. And when this occurs, the screen goes staticky while this swap is taking place. After Fredbear left the stage, I followed him around for a bit, which was kinda cool, because we only ever see these guys walking around from within the cameras. Next, I want to take a look at something I'm sure a ton of you are curious about. So when Spring Bonnie enters our office to scan for intruders, they will enter through our office door. But what does this look like from another perspective? Well, for starters, moving the camera into the hallway, we'll find that Bonnie has mastered their clone jutsu. The Spring Bonnie that wanders through this building actually freezes the moment they reach the end of our hallway, and the model that was previously beneath the stage is moved back inside the map to play out this sequence. We can watch this happening from a different perspective as they slowly enter our office and hunch over in the player's face. Even though I know I am completely safe, this is still incredibly unnerving. They stare blankly for a moment before standing upright again and peacing out. As they leave our office and reach the end of the hallway, this copy will be moved underneath the map again as the walking model resumes its patrolling duties. So skipping ahead to night 3, we can see that Proto Spring Bonnie is now active and making his way through the pizzeria. We can take a closer look at this freaky prototype and watch them as they limp through the halls. They are a lot less cartoon-like than their newer counterparts, and they're especially creepy with the lights off. Typically, they'll enter our office through the doorway, lean down next to the vent, and the screen dips to black. When the light comes back on, they're no longer in our office. If we watch this from a different angle, we can actually see that they simply bend down and warp instantaneously to another location. You'd never see this happening though, as the screen goes completely dark. Coming into night 4, Proto Spring Freddy will immediately make a dash for the vents, which he will use to access the hatch above the player's office. Moving the camera over there, we can watch Freddy as he crawls inside the ducts. He stops at the end, and viewing this from the other side, we can see his head is completely upside down. Heading over to our office, we can take a closer look at what he looks like in that overhead vent. He looks, very sinister as he watches us from above, patiently waiting for his chance to kill us. With this face watching me from the vents, I can't help but miss Mangle a little bit. After we close the hatch and block Freddy from entering our office, he immediately warps away. But instead of entering another vent, he just, crawls through the wall? I'm not sure why he chose to use the wall when there was a vent 10 feet behind him, but whatever works for you, man. Afterwards, he just stands up like nothing ever happened, and then immediately makes a beeline for our office once more. So finally, on night 5, the rest of the cast will be replaced by Insane Freddy and Bonnie. These animatronics work differently than the rest, as they will only appear within the pizzeria when they're trying to kill you. When they load in, they glitch around violently, and they are so insanely fast, it's hard to keep track of them. Even after slowing the game way down, they still move extremely quickly. At this point, I want to see what happens when they jump scare you. But when I moved the camera and let them kill me, well, nothing happened. It was then that I realized that this jump scare doesn't take place within the pizzeria itself. The animatronics used for the jump scare are actually stored just beyond the walls of this map, inside of this bright white light. When the player is jump scared, the camera is simply teleported in front of them as their animation plays out. But that's it for nights 1 through 5, so let's dive into the investigations. So during these investigations, you play as the paranormal investigator Max Donovan, as he attempts to uncover the horrific truth behind this nightmarish franchise. In these segments of the game, you'll explore several locations in a classic point-and-click style of gameplay. You must solve puzzles and locate items that are required to progress, and ultimately play a minigame or two on each night. During the first investigation, you show up outside of Fredbear's family diner. You must open the trunk to grab a wind-up flashlight and the key to this building, and once inside, you will need to find a way to disable this steaming pipe. You'll have to find the code to unlock this door, and also find a way to break these boards. A step ladder must be used to look over the top of this bathroom stall, so we can grab the axe lodged in this guy's head. Afterwards, you break the boards, turn the pipe off that blocks your path, and then approach the puppet master. You have to shine the flashlight on his hand puppet, and avoid flashing him with your light directly. That's it for this investigation, so let's rewind time and take a closer look at this map. So to start, the room that we see in this opening cinematic isn't actually a complete room. It is merely a stage built to look like a room from the camera's fixed perspective. Also, we can find the notepad and newspaper that we viewed during this cutscene floating just off to the side. Inside the parking lot area that we start in, we can take another look at this parking lot from a different perspective, which is pretty cool considering we only ever see this from fixed camera angles. All the buildings surrounding this area are fully modeled, but they're completely empty inside. Speaking of these buildings though, on top of this factory in the background, we will see a billboard that says Polypixel Freebie Pack. This is a free resource pack that was most likely used when the devs were creating these large buildings. Back inside that parking lot, if we look to our right, we will see what looks like Shadow Spring Bonnie for just a second before they leave that window. Moving the camera over there, we can take a closer look at their model. They are textured as solid black with yellow teeth and eyes. They will continue to glare out this window until the player looks at them, after which they will then move off to the side. That's not the only thing hidden off camera though, because just beside the entrance to the building is a flat image of some asparagus. I'm not sure why this is placed here, but do what you will with the information. When we open the car trunk, we can see that the car itself unloads and is replaced by this open trunk model. We can find this same trunk model just outside of this chain link fence, except this one is completely empty. If we fly way outside the map, we can actually find another copy of the trunk that is full of items, except the items within this trunk are organized a bit differently. There's also this black platform containing an empty backpack, but that's it for the stuff outside, so let's head into the pizzeria itself. After entering through the front door, we are moved to a completely new map. Now, what's interesting is that this map is actually a heavily altered version of the Fredbear's location we play on during regular gameplay. Underneath the map, we'll find a giant pair of keys and our flashlight. They're stored just beneath the map, and they are gigantic. Moving the camera into the bathroom, where we get the axe, I want to take a closer look at the man inside this stall. If we look at his face from below, we'll see that he's actually a zombie. His mouth is covered in blood and his eyes are clearly zombified. I'm not sure what I expected here, but it definitely wasn't this. During this investigations minigame, we must keep the Puppet Master in check with our flashlight. They are stored directly beneath this stage until they are called into the map, where they will then just clip through the floor. Right next to the puppet, we can actually find our flashlight, perpetually winding up off screen. When we look down to wind our flashlight, it is actually moved in from out of bounds, and the moment we look back up, it shoots outside the map again. Moving on to the next investigation, we arrive at William Afton's house in the middle of the night. We must grab a pair of shears from the shed in order to open the gate, and then Burnt Freddy will break down the door. We must then grab the parts required to obtain the crank, which we will then use to free the spirits trapped within the animatronics. After freeing Bonnie, Chica will chase us through the house, and we must hide behind the stairs. Afterwards, we will go upstairs and play a minigame where we must keep our light on Chica to prevent her from getting closer, while also using the crank on Freddy when he approaches. After we release both these animatronic spirits, we will then go outside and burn their robotic corpses. So going back in time, this map is actually pretty huge. We can get an aerial view of the house we will eventually be entering, but flying inside, we will see that it is mostly empty. If we take a look inside the shed, where we find Burnt Foxy though, we'll find that the interior is completely hollow. So when we enter the shed, the camera is actually moved way out into the woods where the actual shed is stored. It is just sitting out here in the woods, surrounded by trees. And inside, we can take a closer look at Burnt Foxy. Not far from the shed, we can also find another copy of that backpack we saw earlier. Upon entering the house, we can watch from the inside as Burnt Freddy detaches his feet and breaks down the door. I get that it's polite to take your shoes off when entering someone's home, Freddy, but this is just ridiculous, man. When this cutscene begins, we are moved to a completely different map as well. Underneath the house, we can find Freddy floating next to what I believe is the door he knocked down earlier. He's just chilling down here with his detached feet. And just behind him is also that crank that is used on the animatronics. That's not the only thing hidden out of bounds though, as right beside this house, we can find a massive version of the Puppet Master sticking out of the ground. His body extends way down into the void below, and only the top half of his head is sticking through the ground. You can typically only see a small portion of his head from inside, but this is what that actually looks like. On top of the roof though, we can also find a normal-sized Puppet Master as well. So when Chica chases the player through the house, we hide under the stairs to evade her. If we move the camera over to the entrance during this chase though, we can see Chica just kind of leaning through the wall. We can't see her head poking through the other side, which is pretty funny. Inside the attic, we can watch from another perspective what happens when we free Chica's spirit. The crank slowly rises upwards as she stands facing Freddy, and the moment it is twisted, a large cloud of what looks like smoke explodes out of her head. She quickly moves forward and changes into a sitting pose as she contemplates her life choices. During the next investigation, we must find a way to enter this large, abandoned hospital. We must grab the crowbar that is wedged in the front door, use it to enter the sewers, where we will find a code, and then use that code to turn the power on in the hospital. After opening the garage door, we then head into the hospital, where we make our way upstairs. Once upstairs, we must find a code to enter the storage closet, where we will acquire a screwdriver. The screwdriver is then used to access the panel in the elevator, where we must complete another puzzle to turn it back on. We then head to the top floor to play a minigame with Reaper Toy Chica, and after completing this, we will then play a game heavily similar to Final Nights 3, where we must fend off the Reaper animatronics. So there isn't a ton to look at off-screen during this investigation, but after we enter the hospital, we can take a look at how this map is put together. Each floor of this hospital is actually stored separately from one another, and they're stacked on top of one another right next to this large factory. When the player uses the stairs or the elevator, they're simply warped between these locations. When we start the Final Nights 3 minigame, however, we are taken to a whole new map. Underneath the hospital room, we will find each of the animatronics that we will encounter just waiting out of bounds, including each of the Reaper animatronics and the Fredbear plushies. We can also take a closer look at Balloon Boy, and he's somehow even creepier in this game. I mean, the dude's face looks like it's melting. Now, the final point-and-click segments in this game actually take place during the game's endings. After completing Night 5, the player will have to try and escape Fredbear's family diner. You must make your way through the pizzeria, shutting your eyes whenever the insane animatronics confront you. After grabbing the keys, though, you will then be jump-scared and a cutscene plays out showing the player being stuffed into a Fredbear suit, ultimately becoming Entwined Fredbear. Viewing this from another angle, we can see what happens as we're being stuffed into that suit. The insane animatronics will remain in that office area for the time being, and we can see that there's now a Fredbear suit lying in that hallway. The player's camera simply moves inside the Fredbear mask, and insane Bonnie and Freddy begin clipping through the walls to look at the player. They will just sort of float there, staring at us until this cutscene ends. Now, there are 2 interrogation segments that take place between these investigations, and the answers you choose while being questioned by Entwined Fredbear will ultimately decide which ending you get. In the bad ending, the game simply ends after we are stuffed into that suit. And alternatively, the good ending takes us to Fazbear's Fright, where we are then instructed to burn it down. So when we arrive outside of Fazbear's Fright, we can see that we're inside of what looks like an amusement park of some kind. And behind the main building, we can actually find an entire roller coaster in this open space. It's kind of funny because this roller coaster takes up more space than all these buildings combined. Beyond that, there isn't a whole lot to see out here, so let's head inside. So after entering this, we're meant to start the gas and begin burning the attraction down. However, we are stopped by Springtrap as we attempt to leave. We can take a look at this spring-locked monstrosity up close, and I kinda wish I didn't. He's definitely something to look at. Springtrap then knocks the player out, and the game cuts to its credits. Now that the game has been completed, there are a couple things I want to check out. For starters, let's take a look at the museum. The museum in this game actually has multiple rooms to explore, with each of them being based on the chapters in the game itself. Similar to the way the hospital worked, each room within the museum is actually stacked on top of each other. When you touch one of the doors in the entrance, you will simply be teleported to the corresponding room within this map. Inside the museum, you can see each of the animatronics that we encounter throughout the game, as well as a room showing off some of the game's unused content. We can also find a bunch of hospital objects stored out of bounds. These objects include a corkboard, a wheelchair, a hospital cart, and a privacy screen. Each of these objects can also be found inside the museum itself, but I'm not sure why these are out here. Aside from the museum, you will also unlock the chapter select screen. And this screen allows you to go back and replay each of the game's chapters. If we turn the lights on and move the camera back, we can see how this menu actually works. The animatronics are all relatively close together, and the camera is placed in the center of them all. That way, the camera can simply rotate between each of them. It's definitely a bit odd seeing these scenes in a single shot though. Finally, while looking through the game files, I found a map simply titled Rare Boot. And the only thing within this map is a cube, with this creepy, staticky image overlaid on top of it. It kind of looks like 2 animatronics standing beside each other, but I can't make out what is on these for sure. So the term boot is typically associated with starting an application or opening something. So my hunch is that this map is or was used for a random chance occurrence that could happen when starting the game or loading a different map. I can't be sure though. But with that, we've come to the end of Final Nights 4. AftonBuilt is a free-roaming Five Nights at Freddy's fan game that leads us into the dark trenches of Mr. Can-Do's garbage disposal, a massive junkyard with a nightmarish guard dog. Today, we'll be taking a closer look at this abandoned scrapyard and the many things it hides from the player out of sight. Like, did you know there's a second animatronic hidden here? What about another version of this map that is nearly 4 times as big? Or, quite honestly, one of the most absurd things I think I've found yet, and it's hidden deep beneath this junkyard in the off-limits sewer area. There is a lot more than that too. So I hope you enjoy this behind-the-scenes look of AftonBuilt. As usual, I'll do a quick recap, so we're all refreshed on what we'll be covering. So the game starts us off in a large warehouse known as the home base. This is a tutorial area where we're meant to learn the game's core mechanics before proceeding on to the actual game. We turn the power on, and William Afton begins speaking to us through the AR pad. We then learn how to use the various tools that will be needed to scrap our animatronic foes, including stun bombs and the scooper. After disabling the tamper locks on this Freddy dummy, we're thrown into the game itself. In order to complete this level, we must find our way into the flow control room and grab a pair of bolt cutters, close each of the flooding valves in the trenches, and then complete a list of objectives pertaining to Junkyard Foxy. These include flashing them with a floodlight, hitting them with a scooper, and then ultimately disabling their tamper locks. Throughout this whole ordeal, Foxy is also patrolling this abandoned scrapyard with the sole intention of stopping you in your tracks. After each of these objectives is complete, we can then cut Bonnie free from the vines ensnaring them and overcharge them with our AR pad, bringing the demo to an end. So with the recap out of the way, let's turn the lights on and check out that menu screen. First, we can take a look at this entire truck interior from a different angle. It's a bit claustrophobic in here, and this horrifying spring trap on the wall certainly doesn't help. Something you can't typically see because of the camera's position is that the suit's ears are actually stored beneath this table. They're floating just above the ground, and they even glow when the mouse is hovering over the play button. We can see the exterior of this truck as it floats in this endless void. There's also a strange default textured sphere just off to the side as well. Moving on to the loading screen, I wanted to see how this driving effect was pulled off. So if we move the camera outside of the cab, we'll find that there's no ground beneath our truck. There is, however, a single telephone pole out here, and when the loading screen plays out, this telephone pole will be moved past the truck before instantly warping back to its starting position. This will loop infinitely until the game loads in, creating the illusion of motion while a vehicle is in fact completely still. Next, let's take a closer look at this tutorial area. So even though we never leave this main factory area during this tutorial, there is a lot more to this map than you'd first expect. There are multiple buildings within this small wooded area, but they are all completely empty inside. Beyond these buildings, there is also a large river extending across most of this grassy plain. The water is a strange reddish-brown color though. Not exactly my idea of refreshing. Back inside this factory, we can take a look at these animatronics in the hallway where we'll find that they are not as withered as they may appear. We can see Chica's T-posing body clipping inside this wooden pallet, as well as the entirety of Freddy's body underneath this map. In this garage area, we can find another Freddy T-posing inside this box, similar to Chica. That's it for this tutorial map, but before moving on, I want to see what happens when we activate the scooper in slow motion. So, when we activate the stun bomb, we can see that it actually duplicates itself and flies off screen super fast. The scooper animation also plays out way faster than I expected, as it only lasts about 2 seconds when viewed in bullet time. I almost feel bad using this beast of a machine on Foxy now. This thing is dangerous, man. Upon arriving at our destination, I immediately want to take a closer look at this rustic, decaying Foxy. With the lights on, we can see a lot more detail in this creepy animatronics design. And man, I think I need a tetanus shot just looking at him. From head to tail, he is covered in rust and jagged edges. We can also watch him attack the player from another perspective, and in doing so, we'll find that he simply bites the air next to the player. We'll also see that when Foxy kills the player, we just kind of fall over dead. There is no dedicated jump scare animation, he just continues to chomp at the air in front of us. Just beneath this map, we can also find another copy of Foxy perpetually walking in place. Right next to him, there's also a copy of Bonnie just kind of sitting here. Off to the side, we can also find a couple of endos who have seen much better days. Their legs are completely disconnected from their bodies and placed beneath the map, and so are their eyeballs. So in various places within this map, we'll find an array of animatronic arms sticking out of these trash piles. When the player passes by them, they will reach outward, almost as if they're beckoning to you. Looking inside these piles though, we'll find that these hands aren't really attached to anything. Can someone please give Chica a hand? Next, I wanted to watch Foxy get hit by the scooper from another perspective. And as you can see, once it activates, the scooper will swing forward, and Foxy just kinda gets bonked in the head. They will briefly stand in shock before ultimately collapsing onto the ground. Now, while flying around this junkyard area, I found that there's a lot more to this map than you could typically see during gameplay. For starters, there's a large open area just beyond this stack of cars. There is a ton of grass just kind of floating over here, but there is no floor. This area is sort of visible during normal gameplay, but it's so dark that you can't really see much of anything. But while over here, I made a discovery that I definitely wasn't expecting. A new animatronic we're not supposed to encounter. Now, to my knowledge, this enemy, who I believe is named Courage, was supposed to be used in free play mode that never made it into this demo's release. Something that really surprised me was that this animatronic can actually be found during normal gameplay. You simply follow the fence to your right upon loading in, and you'll eventually come to this large steel gate. If you stand in the right position, you'll catch their line of sight, and then they'll attempt to reach you through said gate. I felt bad seeing them locked up though, so I deleted the gate and released them into the junkyard. Now I have 2 animatronics to deal with, which is, fantastic. Courage is a lot faster than Foxy, it seems, and though they have no animations, they're still capable of damaging and killing the player. It's a bit unfair though, because we're not able to fight back. We're only able to temporarily stun them. Stupid dog, you made me look bad! Now we'll come back to Courage in just a bit, because there is still a lot to see within this map. So practically, half of this map is actually taken up by this quarry, and within this area we can find some pretty interesting stuff. For starters, we can find a handful of these buttons used to activate the scoopers, except these have what look like shadowy hands sticking out of them. Moving the player down here, we are able to walk around, as it is solid ground, and we can even activate these buttons. I'm not sure they do anything though, as there are no scoopers to be seen. There are also these giant blocks of what look like compacted animatronics down here, just floating above the ground. But what's most interesting was yet another animatronic that can be found down here. Clipping into the ground, we'll see a horrifying spring trap laying sideways in an A pose at the bottom of this quarry. They're infused with metal parts, but there is no outer casing to their animatronic suit. This model looks pretty terrifying up close, and definitely not something I want to run into in an abandoned junkyard. Now I can't be sure, but I believe this dude was meant to be used in the free play mode alongside Courage. You can actually see the both of them side by side in a screenshot on their Game Jolt page. Why this guy is down here though is a mystery. So after seeing the multitude of unused content within this map, I decided to take a peek through the game files where I found something kinda crazy. What I found was a map called Junkyard V2 Merged, and is a previously unseen version of this location. According to the developer, this map was originally supposed to include a variety of different areas that the player would have to traverse. These include the pit, the car graveyard, and the facility, all of which are accessible within this unused map. For starters, as we explore this map, we'll find that each of these sections is blocked off by a large purple barrier, preventing the player from progressing. The car graveyard is no longer blocked off by a gate, but instead is blocked by an invisible barrier with some floating text reading, "Area not available in demo." At this point, I decided to turn the lights on once more, and we can see this barrier a bit easier this way. It's super tall, stretching way into the sky above this map. While I was over here, I also decided to check out the facility part of this level as well. It's a large rundown factory with a white platform in the center. There are a couple of trenches on either side as well, and a doorway leading to the back of this large building. In the back of the facility, over by the kitchen, there's a small staircase that we can walk down, and it leads us to this sewage disposal area. If we follow these tunnels, we'll find a room with a rather decrepit Freddy Fazbear, surrounded by some candles. Just to his left, there is a sewer pipe leaking into the room, as well as a small table and some more candles. There's also a piece of paper over here, and although it's a bit hard to read, we are able to make out a couple of sentences. Looking these phrases up reveals that the paper actually contains the phone guide transcript from the first Five Nights at Freddy's game. Knowing this kind of makes this whole area feel like a shrine of sorts, a tribute to what started this massive franchise. If we step into the room in the back though, things get kinda weird. we'll find a T-posing Freddy just kind of standing in the center of the room, and when you approach him, well, just take a look.
I cannot hold it in anymore. I just wanna...
As you just saw, Freddy just sort of floats into the air and then explodes to the "I cannot hold it anymore" meme sound. This was definitely a surprising find, and I have no idea why this was put here. So I'm just going to head back upstairs and pretend this never happened. If we leave through the back door, we'll find that it leads to this area overlooking the pit. As you can see, unlike the previous map, the entire quarry area is now shrouded in a dense white fog. And it's definitely giving me the Mist vibes. There is for sure something in the mist. I just hope it isn't Mist Carmody. Before heading into the pit though, I want to take a look at the car graveyard. Heading in through the entrance, the first thing you'll notice is a working scooper among these piles of cars. This entire area is a pretty sizable maze though, and it's super easy to get lost among its twists and turns. The first open area I found was occupied by this large crane with what looks like a magnet blocking our path. Albeit not very effectively, since we can just sort of walk around it. In the full game, we may have been able to operate this crane to move the magnet out of the way, but for now, it's completely static. I also found this creepy corridor that was full of these animatronic limbs. I'm talking nearly a dozen of them. It's super creepy. Also, courage is still present within the car graveyard, only they're not on the ground anymore. Instead, they're placed on the catwalks that lead you through this rusty labyrinth. They still have functioning AI and will chase the player across these pathways relentlessly. They can, however, get stuck in these ramps pretty easily, which I found kind of funny. Before moving on, I wanted to see what would happen if we dropped courage off of these walkways. So I deleted the floor beneath them, where they began pursuing me through the maze. Although they have no animations, it's still pretty scary being chased through these narrow paths, especially because the red arrow attached to the model becomes visible when they're right on your tail. I can only imagine how terrifying this would have been had it made the final cut in the demo. So at the end of this maze, we'll come to a large steel gate. If we head through this building, on the side though, we'll see that it brings us to a pathway leading into the pit. Following this path takes us down into the pit itself, where we come to yet another labyrinth. When I saw these chunks of condensed animatronics earlier, I really wasn't expecting them to be used this way. The entire maze is made up of these robot cubes, and I don't know how to feel about that. We can also find the buttons we came across earlier, only now it seems they're attached to these large metal pipes. Moving to the center of this maze, we'll find a large metal tower with flames shooting out of the top. And scattered around the base of this structure are a ton of robotic corpses, including Freddy, Fredbear, and some endos. There are also these white arms, but I'm not entirely sure which animatronic they belong to. Within this area, we'll also find a large rectangular object that is completely covered in a white texture. The pipes that we see all throughout this area also seem to attach to this odd structure. This entire area is filled with piles of garbage and animatronic scraps, and it's made even creepier by this layer of fog covering the ground. With the post-processing effects turned back on, this area quickly becomes the scariest section in this game. It is honestly pretty chilling. So at the end of this maze, we'll find a hillside path similar to the way we came in, and it actually leads us up to a small building on this cliffside. Upon entering the building, it appears to be some sort of office building. There is a small set of lockers and a stairway that leads us upstairs to a room full of computers. We can step outside through this window though and drop down into this hole where we'll find a handful of these terminals in this small building overlooking the pit. Finally, taking a look at this map from an aerial view shows us just how big it really is, and we can really appreciate it a bit more from this perspective. But with that brings us to the end of our adventures in this nightmarish junkyard. I hope you enjoyed this lengthy dive into this terrifying fan game series. And if you did, subscribe now for more Five Nights at Freddy's content in the near future. Thanks for watching everyone, and cheers.